The morning mist was a secret keeper in the valley, and for 6 months it had kept Clara May's secret. She was just 17, an orphan with nothing but a silver locket and a strange, quiet gift. A gift for finding lost things, specifically lost cattle. This morning she was guiding a tiny, orphaned calf back toward the biggest ranch in the territory, the Henderson place. This was number 37. 37 calves she'd found, wandering, alone and afraid, in the last 6 months. 37 times she'd used her uncanny ability to understand the low, mournful calls of cattle, a skill that made the other ranchers whisper. They said she was touched, maybe by an angel, maybe by something else. Clara didn't care. She was just hungry. She slept in hay lofts and traded her tracking skills for a hot meal, an orphan in a world that had forgotten her. The Henderson Ranch sprawled out before her, a kingdom of whitewashed fences and blood-red barns. It was a promise of a life she could never have. She'd never met its owner, Jack Henderson, but she knew his name. Everyone did. He was a legend, a man who had carved an empire out of dust and grit. As she approached the main corral, the lost calf trotting at her heels, she felt the familiar pang of anxiety. Would he be like the others? Grateful, but quick to send the strange orphan girl on her way. The silver locket, holding the faces of the parents she'd lost to fever, bounced against her chest. A constant reminder of her mother's last words. "Your gift will lead you home, Clara. Use it wisely." She crested a small hill, and the ranch house came into view. And so did he. Clara May stopped breathing. He was the most magnificent man she had ever seen. Tall as a pine, with shoulders broad enough to carry the world. Sandy hair caught the morning light like spun gold. He was kneeling by a pen, and inside that pen were the very calves she had been returning for months. He was counting them, methodically, making notes in a thick, leather-bound ledger. His brow was furrowed in concentration, the look of a man who misses nothing. Then he looked up. His eyes found her, and his rugged face broke into a smile that could melt a winter frost. And in that one breathtaking moment, Clara knew. He hadn't just been counting the calves. He had been counting her. "Well, I'll be damned." Jack Henderson's voice rumbled like summer thunder as he rose to his full, imposing height. "If it isn't the valley's guardian angel, bringing me number 38. Clara's breath hitched. Not 37. 38. He'd even counted the one at her side. He knew. He'd known all along. Every lost animal she'd returned, he'd seen it as a gift meant for him. His storm-blue eyes held a warmth that buckled her knees as he walked toward her, each step long and confident. The air crackled with his presence, and the silver locket against her chest seemed to beat like a second heart. "Name's Jack," he said, and his work-roughened hand swallowed hers, but the grip was surprisingly gentle. His eyes took in everything: her worn dress, her thin frame, the defiant tilt of her chin, the look of a survivor. "And you must be the mysterious young woman who's been saving my livestock and disappearing before I could properly thank you." Heat bloomed in her cheeks. He'd been trying to find her. The little calf she'd brought trotted into the pen, reuniting with its frantic mother in a scene that brought a familiar sting to Clara's eyes. "I'm Clara May Whitfield," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Her fingers found the locket, a nervous habit. "I don't need thanks. Seeing families reunited is payment enough." But Jack's expression turned serious, his gaze intense, as if he were reading the pages of her soul. The ranch bustled around them, cowhands shouting, horses snorting, hammers ringing on a new barn. But in that moment it was like they were the only two people in the world. 38 calves, Jack said aloud, glancing at his ledger again. Each one found and returned by a girl who asks for nothing. He looked back at her. "Clara May, do you have any idea what you've done for me?" She shook her head, confused. She'd just been doing what was right. But his next words made the silver locket feel like a lead weight. "Those calves," he said, his voice low and serious, "represent nearly $2,000 in future sales." His eyes never left her face. "You single-handedly saved my ranch from financial ruin, and you never asked for a thing." Clara's world tilted on its axis. $2,000. Her simple acts of kindness hadn't just been kind. They had been vital. Jack stepped closer, his voice dropping to an intimate rumble that made her forget how to breathe. "Clara May," he said, his fingers gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I've been looking for you for months, not just to thank you." He paused, searching for the right words. "I need to ask you something important. Would you consider staying here? Not as hired help, but as—" Her heart hammered against her ribs. The silver locket felt like it was burning through her dress. The morning sun cast a golden spell on the ranch, making everything shimmer with magic. This impossible man, this legend, was about to change her life. But the words never came. Instead, the thunder of hooves shattered the perfect morning. 5 riders crested the hill, their faces like stone, their purpose grim. Their leader was a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, his cold eyes sweeping over Jack's ranch like a vulture sizing up a meal. In an instant, Jack changed. The warmth vanished, replaced by steel. He moved, placing himself protectively in front of Clara. His hand drifted down, settling near the gun on his hip. The silver locket on Clara's chest went ice-cold. It sensed the storm coming. "Nathaniel Barrow," Jack said, his voice flat and dangerous, laced with a hostility reserved for rattlesnakes. Clara's blood ran cold. She knew that name. Every rancher did. Barrow was the ruthless cattle baron who devoured smaller ranches, a man who took what he wanted, one way or another. The silver-haired man dismounted with a practiced, theatrical grace. His 4 men stayed on their horses, watchful and still. A thin smile stretched his lips, a smile with no warmth at all. "Jack Henderson," he said, his voice like cracking ice. "Looking prosperous. It's amazing how well a man can do when he doesn't lose livestock like the rest of us." The implication hung in the air, thick and poisonous. The suggestion that Jack's success wasn't earned, it was stolen. "My cattle stay safe because I hire good men and build strong fences," Jack replied, his voice dangerously even. "Maybe if you spent more time ranching and less time scheming, you'd have similar luck." Barrow let out a short, cold laugh. He gestured toward the pen of calves. Clara's calves. "Speaking of cattle," Barrow said, his tone dripping with false sincerity, "I've been hearing strange stories. Livestock disappearing from ranches all over the valley." His cold eyes slid past Jack, landing on Clara for the very first time. "And somehow they all seem to turn up right here, on your spread, Jack." The world spun. The accusation hit Clara like a punch to the gut. Her acts of kindness, her gift. He was twisting it, turning it into a weapon, making her a thief. Jack's body tensed, a mountain of protective fury. He stepped further in front of her. "Those calves were returned by Miss Whitfield," Jack stated, his voice ringing with authority. "She tracks lost animals. She's reunited them with their mothers all over this valley, including some that belong to you, Barrow, if you recall." Barrow's gaze locked onto Clara, dissecting her. She felt small, exposed, a mouse under the stare of a hawk. The locket felt impossibly heavy. She was at the center of a war she didn't understand. "How convenient," Barrow mused, his voice slick with insinuation. "A mysterious girl appears out of nowhere, just as cattle start going missing. And every animal she finds just happens to benefit Jack Henderson." He let the poison sink in. One might almost think it was planned. The golden morning sun now felt harsh, an interrogator's lamp, Her mother's promise, "It will lead you home," felt like a cruel joke. This gift wasn't leading her home. It was leading her to a hangman's noose. The confrontation finally boiled over. Jack stepped forward, his body radiating a fury he could barely contain. "Nathaniel, if you're accusing Clara May of rustling, you'd better have proof, because I won't stand here and let you slander an innocent girl who's done nothing but help your neighbors." The silver locket burned against her skin. This man, who barely knew her, was defending her honor against the most powerful man in the territory. But Barrow's thin smile told her this was exactly what he wanted. "Innocent?" Barrow repeated, his voice full of manufactured disbelief. "Jack, this girl has been wandering the valley for months. No home, no money, yet she always knows exactly where to find valuable livestock." He turned his poisonous gaze to the assembled cowhands. "If that's innocence, then I'm the territorial governor." Shame washed over Clara. She saw herself through their eyes. A homeless orphan with a strange talent. A perfect scapegoat. A perfect accomplice. Jack's jaw was a line of granite. "Clara has a gift with animals," he said, his voice a low growl. "She can track them in ways that seem impossible to men like us. That doesn't make her a thief. It makes her special." The word special hung in the air. A shield, a promise. Clara felt tears welling in her eyes. He was staking his own reputation on her. But Barrow saw an opening. He saw a weakness to exploit. "Special enough to know which cattle to steal?" Barrow pressed, his voice like a snake's hiss. "Special enough to earn the protection of the one man who benefits from every animal she rescues?" Clara watched in horror as she saw it happen. Doubt. It flickered across the faces of Jack's own men. They were simple ranchers, suspicious of things they couldn't understand. And Barrow's lies, they were simple, too. Easy to believe. The locket felt like it was searing a hole in her chest. "That's enough." Jack's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. Even Barrow's men shifted nervously in their saddles. "Clara, get behind me. This is over." But something inside her snapped. She surprised everyone, including herself, by stepping forward. Her hand closed around the warm silver of her locket, drawing strength from the memory of her parents. "Mr. Barrow," she said, her voice clear and steady, "if you think I'm a cattle thief, then prove it." She lifted her chin, her eyes locking with his. "But don't you dare suggest that Mr. Henderson is anything less than the most honorable man in this territory." Her words rang out across the ranch yard like a bell. Several of Jack's men nodded, their doubt replaced by respect. Jack stared at her, his anger melting into pure, unadulterated wonder. This slip of a girl standing up to a tyrant to defend his honor. Barrow's cold smile widened. He had what he came for, a public accusation, a seed of doubt planted. "Very well, Miss Whitfield," he said, swinging back onto his horse. "I'll prove it." His eyes were chips of ice. "And when I do, both you and your protector will learn what happens to thieves in my territory." He rode away with his men, leaving a silence behind that was heavier than any storm cloud. 3 days passed, 3 days of borrowed peace. Clara was staying at the ranch. Jack had insisted. He said it was to protect her. She sat in his sun-drenched kitchen, the scent of coffee and bacon filling the air. Her heart did a nervous little flip every time his hand brushed hers as they reached for the sugar. He'd given her the guest room, treated her like a visiting queen. He was a perfect gentleman. And she found herself wishing he wasn't. The silver locket rested against her chest, warm and constant. "This feels like home," she thought. "Clara," Jack said suddenly. He set his coffee cup down with the careful precision of a man handling dynamite. "There's something I need to tell you, before Barrow makes his next move. Something about why he hates me so much." She looked up. The vulnerability in his storm-blue eyes was heartbreaking, and she knew whatever he was about to say, it would change everything. 5 years ago, Jack began, his voice thick with old pain, I was engaged to be married. Clara's heart gave a sharp, jealous twist. To Barrow's daughter, Elizabeth. He went on, explaining. Elizabeth was beautiful, but she was cruel, shallow, a puppet for her father's ambitions. She held nothing but contempt for Jack's simple ranch life. The final straw, Jack said, his hands clenching into white-knuckled fists on the table, was when I found her whipping one of my horses. It had splashed mud on her dress. The memory was still raw. She laughed when I confronted her. She said animals were just property, meant to serve us. I knew then I could never marry a woman with a heart that cold. The locket pulsed against Clara's chest. Jack's love for animals, the very thing that made him see the good in her, had made him an enemy of Nathaniel Barrow. Barrow was livid when I broke it off, Jack continued. He'd planned on merging our properties. He saw it as a business deal. When I ruined his plan, he swore he'd ruin me. The kitchen was silent, save for the ticking of a clock on the mantel. Clara finally understood. Her arrival hadn't started this war. She was just the newest weapon. Jack, she whispered, reaching across the table to touch his clenched fist. Her fingers trembled. You should have told me. I would have left. I've put you in danger. His hand turned over, his fingers lacing with hers. A lifeline. Clara, don't you understand? He said, his voice urgent. Finding you, watching you with those calves, seeing your pure heart, it made me realize what I'd been missing. He squeezed her hand. I wasn't looking for a fancy lady who could arrange flowers. I was looking for a woman with the courage to wade through mud to save a scared animal. The locket grew warm, so warm. She looked into his eyes and saw it. Not just gratitude, not just admiration. It was love, deep and true, shining through the storm of his troubles. I love you, Clara, Jack whispered, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. And I don't care if Barrow burns this ranch to the ground. I won't let him hurt you. I won't let him take this away from us. Her heart soared. The words she'd been longing to say were right on her lips, but they were stolen from her. The frantic sound of galloping horses shattered the morning peace. Barrow was back, and this time he'd brought the law. Jack's face turned to stone. He was on his feet in a flash, moving to the window, his body a shield between Clara and the men riding into his yard. The locket on her chest went cold. The wolves were at the door. Stay behind me, Jack commanded, his voice the low growl of a man ready for war. But Clara was done hiding. The same grit that sent her into the wilderness after a lost calf made her stand beside him, her chin held high. The territorial sheriff, a man named Morrison, dismounted. He looked like a man doing a job he hated. His weathered face was a roadmap of compromise and regret. Barrow, however, radiated pure triumph. Jack Henderson, the sheriff called out, his voice heavy with official duty. I have a warrant for the arrest of one Clara May Whitfield on charges of cattle rustling. He didn't look at Jack. He looked at the ground. And I need to search your property for evidence. The floor fell out from under Clara's world. A warrant. Witnesses. Barrow had moved fast. He had built his cage of lies. Jack stepped onto the porch, Clara right beside him. Sheriff, he said, his voice tight with disbelief, you've known me for 10 years. Have I ever given you a reason to doubt my word? Morrison looked pained. This ain't about your word, Jack. Integrity doesn't enter into it, Barrow said smoothly, dismounting with a flourish. He produced a folded document from his coat pocket like a magician revealing a trick. I have signed statements from 3 different ranchers, all confirming they saw Miss Whitfield on their property right before cattle went missing. He wasn't finished. And I have other witnesses, witnesses who saw her driving those same animals toward this ranch, under the cover of darkness. Clara felt her knees go weak. It was a conspiracy, a web of lies, half-truths, and bribes, all designed to trap her. "That's impossible," Jack roared. "Clara May has been right here every night for the past week. And before that, she was returning animals in broad daylight." Sheriff Morrison shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. He knew the evidence was thin, but Barrow was the most powerful man in the territory, and power had its own kind of truth. The locket felt like a brand against her chest. Her gift, her mother's blessing, was the very thing that was condemning her. "I'm sorry, Jack," the sheriff said, and he sounded like he meant it. "But I have to take her into custody. The judge will be here next week. She can make her case then." Clara watched in a daze as the sheriff walked toward her. In his hand he held a pair of iron manacles. A wave of pure, unrestrained fury washed over Jack's face. His hand moved. It dropped to his gun belt. And time slowed down. Clara saw it all in that split second. Jack drawing his gun. The sheriff, forced to defend himself. Blood in the dust. Jack a fugitive or dead. And it would all be for nothing. The silver locket seemed to pulse against her skin, a silent warning from her parents. Courage isn't always about fighting. "Jack, no," she said, her voice quiet but firm. She reached up, her trembling fingers touching his cheek. "Don't do this. Violence won't solve anything. It will only give them what they want." He looked at her, his eyes a storm of anguish and rage. The sheriff hesitated, relieved to avoid a gunfight. Barrow's smile was triumphant. He would love nothing more than to see Jack Henderson gunned down in his own yard. Clara knew what she had to do. "I'll go willingly, Sheriff Morrison," she announced, her voice ringing with a strength she didn't know she possessed. She stepped away from Jack's protective embrace. "But I want everyone here to witness," she said, looking from the sheriff to Barrow to Jack's stunned men. "I am innocent, and when the truth comes out, Nathaniel Barrow will be exposed for the liar he is." "Clara May, no!" Jack's cry of protest tore through her heart, but she didn't look back. She walked toward the sheriff, her head held high, the locket bouncing against her chest. She held out her wrists. The cold iron of the manacles snapped shut. "This isn't over," Jack vowed, his voice a raw promise of retribution. Barrow just smiled. He thought he had already won. As the sheriff helped her onto his horse, she glanced back one last time. Jack stood on the porch, a statue of helpless fury. "Count the calves, Jack," she whispered, a message only for him. "Count them all. Love always finds a way home." The ride to town was a blur of dust and despair. The heavy locket was her only comfort. She had found the love of her life, only to lose her freedom in the same breath. The jail cell was small, cold, and smelled of regret. "Miss Whitfield," Sheriff Morrison said, his face etched with pity as he locked the door. "For what it's worth, I hope you can prove your innocence. Hanging a girl your age for rustling, it would stain this whole territory." She sat on the narrow cot as the sun went down, painting the stone walls in shades of orange and blood. She clutched the locket, whispering the prayers her parents had taught her. She had to believe. She had to believe that Jack would find a way. Outside her window, the town settled in for the night. Inside her heart, she held on to the memory of 3 words: "I love you," and a single promise: love always finds a way home. The first 3 days were a living hell. The nights were worse. But on the 4th day, everything changed. Jack Henderson walked into the jail. He wasn't alone. He carried an armload of papers and wore an expression of such focused determination that Sheriff Morrison actually took a step back. Clara's heart leaped. She scrambled to the bars of her cell, the locket cold against her cheek. "Sheriff," Jack announced, his voice booming in the small office. He spread the papers across the desk like a general laying out battle plans. I've spent the past 3 days doing my homework. I've documented every single calf Clara May returned. I think you'll find it illuminating. Sheriff Morrison picked up the first page, his brow furrowed. According to these brand registrations and bills of sale, Jack continued, pointing to a column of figures, every animal Clara returned was a stray calf, worth less than $50 apiece. He let that sink in. Professional rustlers don't risk their necks for $50 calves, Sheriff. They go after prize bulls, breeding stock. This makes no financial sense. A tiny flame of hope flickered to life in Clara's chest. He wasn't just defending her. He was using logic. He was using the truth. Furthermore, Jack said, pushing another stack of papers forward, she returned animals to 17 different ranchers. 17, including several of the men now accusing her. He looked the sheriff dead in the eye. If she was my accomplice, why was she giving away cattle to my competitors? The logic was a hammer, shattering the flimsy case against her. Clara saw the doubt on Morrison's face hardening into certainty. Just then, the door opened. A group of ranchers shuffled in, their hats in their hands, their eyes on the floor. Tom Bradley, a man whose calf Clara had found shivering in a ravine, spoke first. "Sheriff, I need to retract my statement." He flushed with shame. "Barrow's men, they pressured me. Jack here, he showed me the dates. I was wrong about when my calf went missing. It wasn't when I saw Miss Whitfield on my land." One by one, the other ranchers told the same story. They'd been confused. They'd been coerced. Barrow's web of lies was unraveling, thread by thread. The locket against her chest began to feel warm again. "There's something else," Jack said, and his voice turned to ice. "I started looking into Barrow's own business dealings, and I found a very interesting pattern." He slid one last document across the desk. "It seems Mr. Barrow has been buying up a lot of cattle recently, from some very unsavory characters down in Mexico, real rustlers. He's been using forged papers to make the sales look legitimate." Sheriff Morrison's face darkened with fury. Clara gasped. Her arrest, her suffering. It had been a smokescreen, a diversion to hide Barrow's own crimes. The truth was coming out. Sheriff Morrison. A new voice, cold and arrogant, echoed from the doorway. Nathaniel Barrow strode in, his confidence unwavering. But Clara saw something new in his eyes, a flicker of desperation. "I hope you're not letting this saddle tramp fill your head with lies," Barrow said with a sneer. Jack smiled. It was a razor-sharp, dangerous smile. "Actually, Nathaniel," he said softly, "I think the sheriff is beginning to understand exactly who the real criminal is." He turned over the final document. "A bill of sale. This shows you purchased 50 head of cattle last month, cattle that were stolen from ranches in New Mexico." Jack's voice was the clap of doom. "That makes you an accessory to cattle rustling, Barrow, on a scale that makes what you accused Clara of look like a child's prank." The jail fell silent. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock and Barrow's ragged breathing. The locket pulsed against her chest, a steady, triumphant heartbeat. Jack hadn't just saved her. He'd exposed a monster. Sheriff Morrison stood up slowly. The weary compromise was gone from his face, replaced by the righteous fury of a lawman who'd been used as a pawn. His hand rested on the butt of his pistol. "Nathaniel Barrow," he said, his voice ringing with the full authority of the law, "you're under arrest for cattle rustling, conspiracy, and filing false charges against an innocent citizen." Barrow's eyes darted around the room, a cornered rat looking for an escape. He saw there was none. Clara watched, her heart hammering against the silver locket, as the most powerful man in the territory was brought low by the truth. "This is ridiculous," Barrow sputtered, his arrogance crumbling into pathetic bluster. "You can't take the word of this girl over mine." The sheriff let out a harsh, humorless laugh. He picked up the manacles, the same manacles that had bound Clara's wrists. "Nathaniel," he said, "after what I've seen today, I wouldn't trust you to sell me a glass of water in the desert." "There's more, Sheriff," Jack said, his eyes still locked on Barrow. "I have records. He's been bankrupting smaller ranchers for years, stealing their cattle, then buying up their land for pennies on the dollar. He didn't just stumble into crime. He used it to build his empire." The sound of horses filled the street outside. Word was spreading. The king had fallen. "The territorial marshal is on his way from Denver," Morrison announced as he snapped the manacles around Barrow's wrists. "I'm sure he'll be very interested to hear about your business partners in Mexico." Barrow's face twisted into a mask of pure hate. "This isn't over, Henderson," he snarled. "I'll find a way to destroy you, both of you." Jack's smile was calm. "The only thing you'll be destroying is rocks at the territorial prison, Nathaniel. You're going away for a long, long time." The sheriff turned to Clara's cell. He unlocked the door. It swung open. She was free. Clara stepped out into the sunlight pouring through the office window and into Jack's arms. The silver locket caught the light, burning bright against her chest as he held her tight. It was an embrace of relief, of love, of a future that had almost been stolen from them. "I told you," she whispered against his chest, her voice choked with tears. "Love always finds a way home." His heart beat strong and steady against her cheek. He tilted her face up to his voice rough with emotion. "Clara May Whitfield, you saved every lost calf in this valley, but you also saved me from a life I didn't even know was empty." 6 months later, the valley rang with wedding bells. Clara May Whitfield became Mrs. Jack Henderson in a ceremony attended by every rancher she had ever helped. The silver locket, her last link to her parents, rested against her heart as she stood beside Jack under an arch of wildflowers. His storm-blue eyes held the same wonder as the day they first met. As they said their vows, a lowing sound came from the nearby corral. It was the 38 calves, their own little choir, singing for the girl who had brought them all home. The kiss that sealed their marriage was witnessed by a crowd of grateful neighbors and a proud Sheriff Morrison. And in a dark cell, hundreds of miles away, Nathaniel Barrow could only dream of the empire he had lost to his own greed. Later, at the celebration at the ranch, Clara found herself surrounded by the local children. They asked about her magic, her secret for finding lost animals. She knelt down, the afternoon sun glinting off her locket. "The secret isn't magic," she told them, her voice full of a gentle wisdom earned through hardship. "It's just caring enough to look, listening enough to hear, and loving enough to never give up on bringing families back together." Jack watched his bride from across the yard, his heart so full he thought it might burst. She had taught him that true wealth wasn't land or cattle, it was love. As the sun set, painting the mountains in strokes of purple and gold, they stood together on their porch. The last of the guests were gone. Their cattle grazed peacefully in the fields. "Clara Henderson," Jack said, wrapping his arms around her. The locket pressed warm between them. "You brought back every lost calf, but the most important thing you brought home was hope." The first stars appeared in the twilight sky. Clara leaned back against her husband's chest, her home, her future, her everything. She whispered a silent prayer of thanks for her parents who taught her to see kindness as a gift, for a strange talent that had led her to the love of her life, and for the man who had counted 38 calves and realized she was the one who was truly priceless. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to Stories Left Behind for more tales of true hearts and hidden history. She brought back every calf, asking for nothing in return. Would you have seen her worth? Let us know in the comments below.